with servicemen and women regarding housing and consumer loans? Just sort of set the stage, if you would.
Well, there was a Department of Defense study, survey of their own people last year that showed that the second biggest source of stress for our service members, behind only concerns about their career, was their personal finances. They were more worried about their finances than they were about being deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan. And military studies, Pentagon studies have shown that it's concern over their debt, concern over predatory lending practices is really affecting our military preparedness, the ability of our troops to be ready for combat, their ability to get and keep security clearances, and it's taking a huge toll on our military. And a lot of it is in violation of the law. There are laws in place that are supposed to protect service members, and we're finding out that they are just being routinely disregarded, flagrantly disregarded by lenders. We heard just last week that, according to the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, they'd identified almost 5,000 cases where active service members, many of them deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan, in harm's way, were having their homes foreclosed upon back home. That has been continuously illegal since the First World War. It is not some legal technicality, some obscure law. That is something they ought to know better than to do. And they can't possibly be doing that if they're paying any attention to the law at all.
It sounds like there's a lot of confusion, though, as we're listening to folks around the roundtable this morning. Some people are losing their homes and they don't know what agency they need to turn to. Certainly, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau can provide some relief, but what other remedies are out there?
Well, that's true of both service members and civilians. There's a great frustration with the way mortgages are being handled, where they're being serviced. Being able to get a straight answer, being able to talk to somebody who can do something about it, that's not just true of our military, but it's particularly infuriating for there to be a law that's been on the books since the First World War to protect service members from having to worry about what's happening in the courthouse back home when they're in harm's way, to find out that the largest lenders, the largest servicers of mortgages are routinely foreclosing on service members when they're deployed. That should not have happened, and there really is no excuse for it.
Do you want me to keep going?
Keep going.
I know one of the other challenges that we're worried about is not just what's happening in their homes, but also predatory lending.
Right.
And we've seen some challenges in North Carolina trying to hold down those rates.
Right.
Talk to me about your interest there.
Well, Congress passed 4 years ago the Military Lending Act. It was supposed to protect service members, but then there were regulations that had to come with the act, and the regulations let a lot of the bad stuff off the hook. Didn't make some of it apply. And as a result, the lenders have really kind of just rewritten their contracts to fall into one of the loopholes. So Congress passed a law in 2007, and what we're hearing is that it is very rarely applied because the lenders have figured out a way to get around it and to have their stuff go through a loophole. We need to look, the CFPB and everybody else involved needs to look real closely at those loopholes and figure out whether they ought to be changed to make sure the law does what it's supposed to do.
Is part of the challenge, though, that some of the officers don't, or some of the service members do not know what they need to pay first? We were hearing earlier today that because the credit card companies were very aggressive, that they were the ones who were getting paid first.
Yeah.
Then they weren't even sure whether they should pay their mortgage first or the credit card company.
Yeah, they need to have better consumer education. But the Pentagon studies several years ago that really led to the Military Lending Act said you can't just put it off on consumer education. They're being treated badly, and it's not just a matter of knowing their rights better or understanding their finances better. There needs to be someone saying, no, you can't do that. That is predatory, that is taking advantage of people, that is just plain crooked. You can't do it. And that needs to be part of what we do, and not just tell service members what their rights are and hope that they'll know better and call to somebody's attention. We really need to crack down and make sure we end predatory lending.
There's a lot of attention right now on what's happening with servicemen and women and as it relates to their housing. I think there are a lot of people out there that probably think that housing is covered and it's not an issue for our military servicemen and women. As you're traveling the country, tell us some of the stories that you're hearing briefly.
Housing is a big issue for them right now. They certainly are not immune to the housing downturn that has affected a great part of the country. Some of the states where military are stationed are among the hardest hit. For instance, I was recently in Florida, And about the groups I talked to, about half of them owned homes, and about 2/3 of them were underwater on their mortgages. In other words, they owed more than the house was worth. And they were very worried about what would happen when they got orders to move, because they cannot sit in the house and hunker down and wait it out. They get orders from the Department of Defense to go, they have to go. And sometimes it's difficult for them to access some of the relief that might be there for residents of the state who are going to stay put. So we've been trying to raise awareness about their issues, that not only they're not immune to the housing problem, but sometimes some of the remedies are not easily accessible for them.
Talk a little bit more broadly, if you would, about some of the other challenges they're facing. Certainly, there's a lot for any family to keep up with, but when there's a deployment involved, those challenges seem to be exacerbated.
Well, they are. You know, you may have a spouse at home managing the finances. The military is a young population. Sometimes that may be a young family who don't have a lot of experience in making it work. You've got, now with the internet, you may have the service member spending on deployment the same dollar that the spouse may be spending at home. And it's a constant education process also to let them know where they can go for help or information if they do have financial issues. And I know the Guard and Reserve work very hard on, you know, establishing virtual networks where family members can go for help, but you have to keep working at it, letting them know the resources are there, and certainly the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is a resource for them on a federal level.
I know that there was some concern this morning about beyond just housing and foreclosures, unsecured debt, credit cards were becoming a problem. What is your agency hearing, and what help are you able to provide?
Debt is an issue. We've heard that at a number of military installations. There have been surveys that have shown the military is carrying more debt than their civilian counterparts. Many of them enter the service in debt. Sometimes the signing bonus is a lure for them because they hope they can eliminate some of that debt. Certainly a great part of it may be student loan debt, and that of course does not go away even in bankruptcy. So it's going to impact that family budget and really can lead to big problems. So we want them, when they get their military education benefits, also to be very careful how they spend those and not to pile more debt on top of that.
What are 2 or 3 things that any military family should ask before they enter a contract that's going to potentially add debt to the bottom line?
First, they should ask, can I take this contract to my legal assistance officer and have them look at it? And if the person is reluctant to let them do that, then that's a very good sign that you probably should not be signing that contract. And don't be shy about saying you don't understand. I think a lot of people are embarrassed to say, I don't understand what this thing says, but how many of us really do understand these contracts? There are many pages of fine print, and part of what the CFPB is trying to do is make contracts simpler, more understandable, so people can actually see what they're buying and what the terms are.
Looking ahead to next year, we know that probably some of the predatory lending bills that we saw in North Carolina's legislature that were held this year will come back up. I know you're not an expert in that, but just your thoughts on some of the predatory lending practices that are out there that are targeting our military.
It's a continual issue. I think the products tend to morph to get around rules that are put in to hopefully keep them in check or keep them reasonable. And that's certainly something that we have the ability to look at the CFPB. We will be able to regulate the largest non-bank lenders once we have a director in place. And I think it's very necessary. We can also write rules because people are changing their product. There is a Military Lending Act that does cap the interest rate at 36% for service members on active duty and their family members, but it's pretty limited. You know, it says the loan has to be less than 90 days, $2,000, closed-end credit. So lenders find ways to make it open-ended credit, and voila, they're not under that law anymore. So we have to kind of see how things morph and then address those.
And finally, some others may have questions, but finally, you had mentioned a website that folks can go to, get information, and perhaps lodge a complaint. What is that website again?
Yes, our website is consumerfinance.gov. We do encourage people to come to us. We are taking consumer complaints now at the CFPB on credit card issues, and just since last week, also mortgage issues. So we do encourage people with problems in that area to come to us, and they can file a complaint. And also, I hope they'll look at our military pages, and they'll find resources there as well.
That's right. Anybody else?
If anybody else don't know Any more questions? You
More questions?
go ahead, Rob.
You spoke about meeting with banks. What is the importance of you meeting with both lenders, service members, experts, and their advocates?
Well, I think it's important for me to be informed really on both sides of the issue, because you know, there are reasons sometimes for why financial institutions do what they do, and also there may be second and third order effects when solutions are proposed that I might not be aware of, but someone who is at a financial institution might be able to point out. We are a regulator of banks and will be of non-banks when we get a director, and certainly I think in my role it's perfectly acceptable for me to hear their perspective and what they consider the issues to be that prevent them maybe from offering products that you know might be helpful. And the CFPB as a whole also meets with the financial institutions on a regular basis, again, to give them a chance to express their opinion and let us know what they want us to hear.